Let's talk a little bit about ISO and understanding ISO. ISO is a very important part of your photography. So it's good to understand and good to have a good understanding about it. So let's talk a little bit about it. Hello everybody, my name is Attila Mate from Blue Sky Photography, and today I'd like to talk to you about the third topic in the exposure triangle, and that is the ISO. Now we used to talk about the shutter speed first and then the aperture, and this is the third part of the ISO triangle, how the photographers are calling it. So with these three things you can set your correct exposure. So let's talk a little bit about the ISO. First of all, before somebody starts to comment and somebody starts to say that ISO is not part of the exposure triangle, yes, I know there are some misunderstandings. Well, not misunderstandings. Let's say some photographers, they don't agree with each other in regards to this topic. You know, they will say that some of them will say that the ISO is not the part of the exposure triangle, but the light gathering capability, like the amount of light you get, is the part of the exposure triangle. The other party says that the ISO is actually a standard. ISO is a standard measurement, how sensitive is the sensor. And this standard came from the film era, when the film cameras were on the market. And they always categorized the films by the ISO capability. I mean, it was a 100 ISO film, 400 ISO, and blah blah blah, so on so on. So the most important is that today just to avoid any confusion, we will talk with ISO. So we will say that ISO is the part of the exposure triangle. That's true that in some companies, some brands, sorry, the ISO standard, let's say, is a little bit different than in other companies, in other brands. So that's a little bit confusing. But I would say that's just to understand, you know, and not to confuse anybody. Let's talk with ISO. So first of all, you must know this. This is the must rule, that the lower is the ISO setting on your camera, it is better for your picture because it is less digital noise in the picture. Now you know that digital noise until some stage it is okay. You can work it out in post production, so you can take out of your pictures. You know, even in video, even if you shoot video, video is a little bit different, but it's the same concept. So you can take out until a certain amount, but after a certain amount it is bad and your pictures will look bad. So this is a golden rule, that you should keep your ISO as low as possible. So pay attention all the time, and if you can, better open up your aperture or lower down your shutter speed until the safe limit, but don't crank up your ISO, because your picture will suffer from it. So the most important rule is keep your ISO as low as possible. Now there are situations when you must crank up your ISO because you have no other option. But if you don't have other option, then you have to do it, obviously. But you have to keep it as low as possible. Now I will show in your camera how to set different ISOs. There is in the Nikon D7200. I can only speak about the Nikon D7200 because that's what I use. But I'm pretty sure that in the rest of the Nikon cameras they will be kind of the same settings, and obviously in Canon as well you can find, maybe not in the same location, but you will find those settings if you want to. So I will show you in my camera how to set the ISO and how to set the auto ISO, because there is also in many cameras. Now I don't know in Canon or Sony. Sony does have auto ISO. Probably Canon has as well. So the auto ISO, it is very good because you can set the minimum and the maximum range of the auto ISO, and the camera will automatically adjust your ISO until that limit what you set. And this is very comfortable because if you are shooting somewhere in a wedding, let's say, or in an event, and you set your auto ISO, let's say 3000 or 2000. I would say honestly, I'm a little bit perfectionist, so in my pictures I don't really like noise. So what I do, I set my ISO mostly at ISO 2000 with the Nikon D7200, and if I see that there is no other option, then I will go up to ISO 3200, but that's the highest I will go with the Nikon D7200. But mostly I try everything to keep my ISO lower than 2000. Now, if I have to, I add lights. I take artificial lights, I take flash, I take video light, I take LED lights, whatever it takes. I try to keep it lower than 2000. If I can't, I will go up to until 3200. But most of the time I can figure it out with lights. You know, I add some artificial lights, some flash or some LED light or whatever it takes, you know, and I succeed to keep it down most of the times. Very, very rarely it happens when you can't. But anyway, this is a good point to keep in your mind, you know. Try everything and be creative. It's not just that, oh, I don't have that light, so crank up the ISO. That's the easier thing, you know, that, oh, just bring it up. Yes, and after that you have troubles in your photos. So be creative, change the location, bring your subject close to a window, or bring your subject, if you are indoors, obviously. Bring your subject close to a light source if you don't have a window. Something, you can use the indoor lighting, and you change your white balance, you know, to match the indoor lighting. So there are possibilities. You just have to be creative, and you have to think twice before you crank up your ISO. That's what I do anyway, and that is my advice. But on the other hand, some photographers, they like a little bit of grain in their pictures, and that's no problem. If that is your shooting style, that's okay, that's no problem. So if you like your pictures to be a little bit noisy, that's okay. So let's see in my camera how you set up your auto ISO, and how you do it to tell to your camera not to go above a certain level. So let's see that. So we are in my camera's menu screen actually. So you can see over here. I will show you how to set up the auto ISO. So as you can see now, at the moment the camera is at ISO 400, and if you want to change that ISO, you can push the ISO button down here on Nikon D7200, and if you push that button, you can turn the the back control dial, and if you turn the back one, then you can see that the ISO is changing down here. So that's how you change the ISO. Now if you want to change the auto ISO, or just your manually set the ISO level, then you push the ISO button and you turn the front dial, and then you see that here it says ISO auto. You see, this is only ISO. So now it's now the camera is in manual mode, let's say. So you set the ISO level and the camera will stay on that ISO level. Or on the other side, if you push and you put auto ISO, then the camera will be set on ISO auto, and the camera will go to the certain level that you tell him to go. Now, how you set the level? That's the next question. You go to the menu, and then when you go to the menu, you go up here to the photo shooting menu, and then you go down until you get to the ISO. You can see over here that ISO sensitivity settings. You press the OK button, and then you get in there, and then you can set over here the ISO sensitivity, the maximum ISO sensitivity. And usually I set over here at 3200. And then if I go down to the auto ISO sensitivity control, you see over here that it says on. So now it's at the moment auto ISO is on. Maximum sensitivity is 3200. Now if like I told you, if you want You can set this to 2000, you can set this to 1600, how you like. I like mostly to be at 2000. I don't really like to go above 2000. So that's what I would do. If I see that the picture is still dark, then I go further up to ISO 3200. But I try my best to keep on 2000. So if you set over here that maximum sensitivity is 2000, the camera will go until 2000. So you don't go further up than 2000. So this is how you set the ISO to the auto mode and to the manual mode. I would suggest to practice and try to figure out which one works out best for you, and that one you use. Like I told you before, I wouldn't go further up than ISO 2000. I try my best to keep it lower than 2000, but that's only me. It's up to you. You can go further up if you like the pictures, you like the results. It's okay. I did a test with the Nikon D7200, and I saw that until ISO 4000 the pictures are usable. I don't say that I like them. I don't like them personally myself, but they are usable. So you are able to take the noise out in post-production. But that means obviously that you have to trade in some sharpness, because you have to keep in mind that when you do in post-production noise reduction, that means you give up some sharpness. So I don't like to give up some sharpness. That's why I try to keep my ISO as low as possible. So I hope this video was helpful to you guys, and I hope that you learned something from it. And if you have something constructive to add to this video, please feel free and leave a comment down below. And let's help others to understand who doesn't understand how the ISO works and the exposure triangle. Let's help them to understand and to be able to set their camera correctly. So as I told you, this was the third part of the exposure triangle. So if you had a look on the 1 or 2 or 3, then you will be able to set your exposure correctly. Now in your camera there is the light meter incorporated, so you can see in your camera if your exposure is right or wrong. And I hope that you will be able to set your exposure correctly, because that is very important for your pictures. Now I hope that you will have a lovely day, and see you in the next video. Take care guys, have a nice day.